our guns immediately and we just start running towards the sound of the screams. Eventually, we have to crawl underneath this outside stairwell and we get into this open courtyard, just two-story attached condominiums all around us. We get to right in front of the condominium where the screaming's coming from, and it goes dead silent. Literally from blood-curdling screams to just eerie silence. I know I've got more officers coming on the way, but we've got to get inside.
Impact of trauma lives of police officers, their families, and the courage it takes to overcome. On episode 20 of The Silent Struggle, we focus our discussion on the story of a police sergeant and his journey to fight for survival following the on-duty shooting death of an armed subject. I am Robert Asensio. I am joined with my partner, co-host, David Magnuson, retired police chief, and we are joined by internationally best-selling author, retired police sergeant, Air Force captain, veteran, Michael Sugrue. How are you, Michael?
Doing great. How about you guys?
Good, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So, Michael, let's get right into it. Let's take you back to December 27th, 2012. You're working for the Walnut Creek Police Department. You're on patrol. You get dispatched to a burglary in progress of an armed subject. Can you take it from there?
Absolutely. So, brand new patrol sergeant, graveyard shift. Shift started right after Christmas and literally just a few hours from going off duty. And this call comes out of a woman barricaded inside a condominium and a man armed with a knife. Immediately, I throw my car and drive. I'm driving as fast as I can to get there. Other units are responding. It's in a high residential area, apartments, condos. I know the area, but I don't know this exact unit. About halfway there, the dispatcher gets on the radio very frantic, and she says now the boyfriend and girlfriend are barricaded inside their bedroom. And so I was a bit confused, and I actually asked for clarification on the radio and asked if the boyfriend was the one with the knife or was there a third subject inside the condo armed with a knife. And she quickly clarified, no, there's a third subject armed with a knife. And so now just all these thoughts are racing through my head, trying to get there as fast as I can. Literally, I pull up on scene in front of this large complex. It's very dark. As I start to get out of my patrol car, the dispatcher starts screaming on the radio saying, units, there's a struggle. And then suddenly she says the phone line goes dead and she loses all contact inside that condominium. At that same moment, thank goodness, one of my officers pulls up right behind me. And we can hear blood-curdling screams coming from a female voice coming from the distance. And we pull out our guns immediately, and we just start running towards the sound of the screams. Eventually, we have to crawl underneath this outside stairwell, and we get into this open courtyard, just two-story attached condominiums all around us. We get to right in front of the condominium where the screaming's coming from, and it goes dead silent. Literally from blood-curdling screams to just eerie silence. I know I've got more officers coming on the way, but we've got to get inside that condo. We don't know if that couple is being killed, if they've already been killed, they're bleeding out, but we've got to get in there. So we announce ourselves several times. Nothing, no movement, no sound. Eventually, my partner notices a huge window the size of a door, a louvered window that's completely shattered into the condominium. And so again, we announce ourselves at this broken window. Nothing. My partner goes in first. I'm right behind her. Immediately, we're in this kitchen area, just glass everywhere. We exit the kitchen. She goes right. I go left. I clear the family room, dining room area. I don't see anybody. No signs of a disturbance. Immediately, I join her back at the bottom of the stairwell. So literally, there's the locked front door right behind us. We're shoulder to shoulder. She is to my right. And there's a solid wall to her right. And we're looking up this dark stairwell. Our guns are out. Lights are illuminated. And we're yelling, police, police, come out. Show us your hands. Show us your hands. Nothing. And this seems like eternity when it's happening, but literally this all happens very quickly. Suddenly, a male subject comes out at the top of the staircase. And we can't see the entire right side of his body. just sweating profusely, eyes wide open, literally staring straight through us like a zombie. And again, we're yelling at him, show us your hands, show us your hands. Nothing. I don't remember any body movement, no facial expressions, no words were exchanged. I don't even remember the subject's eyes blinking. At some point, two more officers arrive on scene and they come inside the condominium. I yell for one of them to get the taser, less than lethal force, and the male officer says, I've got the taser. He positions right behind myself and that other first officer on scene. So three of us are at the bottom of the staircase. The fourth officer goes perpendicular to the staircase. Moments later, the male subject fully comes out. My partner yells, he's got a knife, he's got a knife. And in his right hand, he was clenching a full-size kitchen knife, huge knife. And so now, again, guns out, pointed at him, we're yelling, drop the knife, drop the knife. No reaction. Again, no movement, no nothing. Suddenly, he takes the knife up over his head in a stabbing position, starts coming towards us. I shoot. Other officers shoot. I don't know if I've hit him. He's now at the bottom of the staircase. Two of the officers retreated to the family room, living room area. The male officer that had tried to tase, he dropped his taser, now has his firearm out. And literally, myself and this one officer are just a few feet from the subject at the bottom of the staircase. I don't see any blood. I don't see any wounds. But he's still clenching this huge kitchen knife. And all we know is he's between us and the couple upstairs. And we've got to get to them. We've got to save their lives. And so again, literally, we're yelling at him, drop the knife, drop the knife. He starts coming back up with the knife. There's no nice way to say it, but, we shot instantly he was killed. I mean, his wounds were absolutely devastating. His eye was gone. I mean, just blood everywhere. We already had medical staging, and I had dispatch send in medical. We checked for vitals. There were none. I had officers go up and check on that couple, and thank God we got there and we did, because this subject had been stabbing through their bedroom door with this huge knife, and literally the door was coming off the hinges, and this poor couple was physically barricading their body against that door, trying to prevent him from coming in.
Harrowing. What do you think, Chief?
Riveting. I mean, plays out step by step. You can feel it as he's saying it. What's going to happen? And what takes place next. I mean, this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
This is just the beginning. I mean, as odd as that may seem, for people that haven't been in law enforcement or haven't had a discharge of firearm, now the drama is going to begin.
Which, before we go into the next part of the story, for the like David said, for the person who's never been involved in a shooting, you're walking us through some detailed information. And I thank you for being so courageous and sharing the story in the detail that you did, because there were some things that you just mentioned that really popped at me. The amount of detail that you focused in on, no blinking, wide eyes, you see the side of his, part of his side is turned to you, raising the arm, lunging at you guys, the knife.
Also the color of the knife, if I recall correctly, wasn't it like a bluish tint to the knife or something to that effect?
It was a large blue ceramic kitchen knife.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you're going through an unnatural act at the moment. You're hyper focused. All your training comes in, and I would suspect that some of your military background comes in, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah. Let's talk about if you remember the split decision of shoot, don't shoot. Like when you realize this is a threat, an imminent threat to me, the officers, to life. Can you talk about that? What was going through your head and the decision to take that shot?
Absolutely. I just remember the entire time when I was yelling at him to drop that knife, I was in my heart just hoping, praying he was going to listen to me, that he was going to drop this knife. And, oddly enough, and at this point, I'd been a civilian police officer for 8 years, prior military 6.5 years, and 99.9% of the time in these kind of deadly threat situations was somebody holding a knife, holding a gun, and I'd been involved in these in the past. they comply. Eventually, they drop the knife or they run away. But at this point, I just remember as soon as that knife started coming up, and it's kind of like super focused vision. All I saw was the tip of that knife coming directly at me, and literally in a blink of a second, I saw my life literally flashing before my eyes, and I thought I was going to be killed. In that moment, that literally was the closest I'd ever come to being killed. And in fact, that moment forever changed that feeling of invincibility that I had. I mean, up to this point, I was undercover for 2 years on the state drug task force.
Let's talk about that, Michael. Let's talk about your background in narcotics and your undercover work, the great good that you did, and then we'll ask some questions and maybe go into your little bit of your military background to give the audience a better sense of who you are.
Absolutely. So, in the Air Force, I was security forces, and that's basically anti-terrorism, force protection, air-based ground defense, nuclear security, foreign airfield assessments. I was also a Phoenix Raven, which is a specialized subset of security forces members that deploy with air crew, aircraft to high threat, high danger areas, and they're directly responsible for the safety of that air crew and that aircraft. And so I did that for 6.5 years, literally all over the world. I was in the Middle East, South America, Europe, all over the United States. So I go into civilian law enforcement, patrol officer, eventually field training officer, detective, and then I was undercover on a California state drug task force. So basically like the California version of the DEA. And we were tasked with targeting mid to high level drug dealers and drug traffickers. And literally, I mean, that assignment was a dream come true, but in reality, it was probably the most dangerous thing I'd ever done. I mean, literally, we were doing high risk entries like a SWAT team would, but we were doing it as our own team. Mm-hmm. And we were doing it sometimes, multiple times a day, and definitely, 4 to 5 times a week. And we're going into the most dangerous homes with known armed drug dealers, literally guns out. These people are literally sometimes in their bed still, and we're going into their sanctuary, their kingdom, and we're ordering them on the ground. We're cuffing them up, and in all those instances, people complied. I mean, sure, people fought, people ran, but, fast forward, I eventually leave that assignment. Now I'm just back on patrol in the city of Walnut Creek, which is a nice city. It's a destination area for shopping, for dining, low crime. And I had been in the worst areas of Northern California, undercover. Now here I am back in one of the safest cities, right? And here comes this call out of nowhere, because this stuff can happen anytime, at any point. Doesn't matter where you work, who you are. And I'm now faced with the most dangerous situation I'd ever been involved in both the military and in civilian law enforcement.
David, that's something that you can relate a lot to.
Yeah, I mean, I worked the undercover units, city of Miami, primarily drugs, but we also sat up on robbery, which ended up being my favorite part of law enforcement. Stakeouts, you're going to run across bad people, and you're right about this. The compliance level was pretty good. You had enough people with you. You usually had to drop on them. Like offense in football, where you're going to cut. Makes it a little bit more difficult for the defender. But yeah, they usually did comply. If not, they took off running, and they got caught. But yeah, you make a very interesting point. It seems to me, the less quote unquote dangerous areas and stuff is where things go off the deep end quickly. And maybe domestic related, or have somebody where somebody knows the potential victim, or they know the suspect, or things along those lines. Even the ambushes that could go on a seemingly innocuous call. But yeah, I could certainly relate to what you were talking about. You do make a very sound point with that. Yeah. So.
Well, let me ask you both of you guys a question. High liability incidents take a toll on you, right? You generally
hypervigilance for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're in a mode, in the yellow to red mode, right? Always where you're on guard, head on a swivel for what's going to come next. But year after year after year, all these things take a little, like they're chipping away at the officers, the military, at the person that's out there, the frontline worker, right? Now you have an incident where you have to take action. In your case, Michael, you had to confront an armed subject that was an imminent threat, not just to you, your partner, but the people that he was accosting, and you take the shot. What impact did that have on your life? I know it's had some impact on you. I know it's had some impact on me, but let's talk about you, Michael. What impact did that have on your life?
It was huge, but to take a step back to explain it a little bit further, up to this point, 6.5 years in the military, 8 years civilian law enforcement at the time of my shooting, I had been exposed and involved in hundreds and hundreds of traumatic incidents from, child deaths, child abuse, suicides, homicides, domestic violence, horrible car accidents, fatal car accidents. And the issue was that I never dealt with those things. I just pushed them away, bottled them up, and eventually they kept piling up and piling up and piling up. And the best way to look at this is that this shooting was my tipping point. This is where my jar, it overflowed. It got too much. And for me, this was my breaking point. And so it wasn't just the shooting, but it was the hundreds and hundreds of incidents and the almost shootings that I was involved in up to this point. And so, the shooting happens, and immediately a whole series of administrative things happen, dual investigations. I'm being interrogated by the district attorney's office, by our own internal affairs investigators. And literally, I'm a suspect in a homicide at this point. And so I'm being investigated. My rights are being read to me. My fingerprints are being taken, checked for gun residue. My duty belt and equipment's being taken. I'm put off work. I'm ordered not to talk about this with anybody. And in this point, which we haven't brought up yet, there was a lawsuit filed almost immediately from the family members of the person that tried to kill us. So even though this was a fully justified shooting, even though we saved not only the two people's lives upstairs, but fellow officers, we were sued. And eventually that lawsuit drug on for almost 4 years. Eventually, I ended up a defendant in federal court in San Francisco. So this event that I so wanted to forget, these nightmares that I was having, I couldn't get this face, this image of this man that tried to kill me out of my dreams. Literally, my life just started spiraling downward. And I had to remember every finite detail of this because we were being sued. And again, we were ordered not to talk about this. And then we were facing deposition after deposition, court hearings, just all these things. And it got to the point where literally I didn't want to be here anymore. It was so bad that I literally wanted to die in the line of duty. I started purposely putting myself in dangerous situations, hoping a bad guy killed me at work.
That has to take its toll. It's constant. It's over and over again. Then it went to civil. And you can't get it out of your mind because you have to remember the facts. You certainly don't want to stray from what you said. The facts are the facts, but you have to keep going over and over. You can't even heal.
And Michael, that's why I asked about with the impact, right? Because for the benefit of the audience, for anybody that will see this video, right? This interview, this conversation, which is very honest. Very few people that go through these incidents will have the courage to discuss it in the detail that you do. But how many times is this repeated in law enforcement? And I bring that up for the benefit of the people who are the audience. If you really truly support law enforcement and the people that are out there protecting you, please consider what they go through and the price they pay for serving and protecting. Now let's go back to the story here, Michael, because your story doesn't end there, right? I believe you prevail, or you do prevail in court, but it's not just about prevailing in court, it's prevailing in life. I mean, you're struggling to survive. So you mentioned about your question as to whether to live or not, right? You're placing yourself in high liability situations. What's your turning point? When do you realize, and why do you realize that you need to address this demon that's before you?
So our trial finally ended. So the shooting was December 27, 2012. The trial took place in September 2016. And we prevailed, like you said. Judge Breyer, the brother of Supreme Court Justice Breyer that just retired, he even said on the record, had it not been for our actions, more lives would have been lost that night. But here's the thing, when I was sitting there in court for 2 full weeks, literally having a jury stare at me every single day, and having the plaintiffs who brought in these crazy expert witnesses who were saying that we planted evidence, that this guy was never armed, that we were cold-blooded murderers. I mean, literally, and what I didn't tell you yet is that this guy, the guy that tried to kill me, he had an identical twin brother, and he was in the courtroom. And so this face that I couldn't get out of my nightmares for 4 years was literally there every single day in the courtroom, just a few feet behind me. And we would break for, 10 minutes to go use the restroom. The family members of the man that tried to kill me were lined in the hallway. And I had to worry about when I took a bathroom break, were one of these people going to come in there and try to attack me or try to take me out? And so, this whole process of waiting for this lawsuit, that 4 years, I had told myself, I kind of said, you know what? This is the problem. This lawsuit is hanging over me. I blamed everything on that. And I told myself, hey, as long as we prevail, all my problems are going to go away. My life's going to magically get better. But that morning I woke up after the trial ended, it got much, much worse because my nightmares increased. I started to doubt myself, even though I know I saved lives, even though I know I had no choice. I started thinking, what if I would have paused here? What if I would have waited there? What, magical thinking that wasn't realistic. But that's where I got to the point where really I wanted to die in the line of duty. And so, again, September 2016, now go a couple weeks after Thanksgiving, or a week after Thanksgiving 2016. So a few months later, I'm on duty. I'm the day shift patrol sergeant, getting ready to go home, and a suicide in progress comes out. It turns out it's my best friend's house. This man, John, was a Vietnam veteran, but he was also a 35-year reserve officer with my department, and we rode together all the time. Well, he literally tried to kill himself at home, and I got to the trauma center just as the ambulance brought him in. He was covered in blood. He had stabbed himself in the torso, slit both wrists, OD'd on multiple prescription medications, and I literally had 30 seconds before they rushed him off to surgery. And I looked him in the eyes and I said, John, you're going to make it. You're going to pull through this. But my heart, I didn't think he had a chance. I was like, there's no way he's going to survive this. And I remember sitting in the hospital. And this is what happened. I was sitting in the hospital for hours with my administrators, with my friend John's sister who had driven up. And I just felt this overwhelming sense of guilt as to why I didn't see the signs that my own best friend was suffering. I had no idea that he would have ever done something like this. He never talked about the Vietnam War. He never talked about his post-traumatic stress injury. And while sitting there, all I could think about was my 6-year-old daughter at the time. And what was going to be the effect on her if she found out that I killed myself, or if I died in the line of duty? What's going to be the domino effect on her? And so a month after that, and thank God he survived, because John saved my life by trying to take his own life. And a month after that, on the anniversary of my shooting, 2016, December 27, 2016, I finally got the strength and courage to ask for help. And that is where everything changed for me.
And, and during this time, too, I understand you were doing with loved ones that were ill. And I think offline we had that discussion on the closeness of, with your father. That's, all these things come into play. And I think oftentimes what gets lost in the mix for civilian population, and it's not an us versus them, that's not it at all. But while you're having to deal with these issues that came your way because of this person's actions, you still have the other issues that go on in everybody's lives, whether it's family related, whether it's personal, marriage related, everything compounds. But going back to your point here, I mean, what you just said, you saved your own life, John being able, by trying to take his, it saved yours. That's pretty deep. That's pretty deep. Does he know that? Have you spoken to him about that?
He still has guilt and shame over that. And we talk almost every week, and I remind him of that fact. And, in fact, in our new book that came out, he has his own chapter, and he talks about his experience in Vietnam. He talks about his suicide attempt. And I've told him, I said, John, by sharing your story, you're saving lives. I mean, yeah, you saved my life, but now you're saving countless lives. And he's been in a documentary, he's in the book, and I'll tell you what, I mean, he is the most courageous, bravest person that I know. And thank God he pulled through that, because like I said, he absolutely saved my life.
So let's talk about your book real quick.
So yeah, Relentless Courage, Winning the Battle Against Frontline Trauma. Co-authored with Dr. Shauna Springer, a PhD. She's a clinical psychologist, a Harvard graduate. She's already written 3 other books. Phenomenal person. She's a culturally competent clinician. But yeah, this book is very unique. I'm going to tell you why. As far as I know, there is not a single book like this in the world. And the reason why is every chapter is split into 2 parts. The first part of every chapter is my story told in my voice, going all the way back to childhood. But the second half of every chapter, Doc Springer comes in, she breaks everything down, she explains it. She explains why I'm having the feelings or thoughts that I'm having. She's explaining the physical and mental impacts of the things that we have to endure, both in our personal lives, in our work lives. And she does it in a way that is very easy to understand, that anybody can pick up this book. In fact, I had my daughter read it when she was 11 years old, and she was so engrossed in it, but she understood everything. And Doc Springer basically is able to show the human side behind the badge and behind the uniform. And so this book is not just for military members. It's not for first responders. It's not just for their loved ones, spouses, children. This book is for everybody out there. And it literally will rock your world. Once you start it, you will not be able to stop.
David, you have it right here.
Here it is. I got it the other day. I went through it, and it just true to your words. I mean, your points were riveting. And then you go over to Doc Springer and what she has to say. And it ties up the loose ends. It gives you a perspective there from somebody that can speak from experience. So it makes a great deal of sense. I enjoyed it. I would certainly recommend it. But there's, we got relentless courage. I think the word that jumps out at me more than it is relentless. It's relentless. You just got to go after it. You got that courage, like most of law enforcement does. That courage to do what most people don't, and the military as well. Relentless. Keep driving forward. Keep driving forward, even when it's darkest. It's always darkest before the dawn, so they say. But it's inspiring too, especially the part where you talk about John and how you were able to. What dawned on you, finally what you needed to do. So there is an inspiration behind that too. And I certainly recommend the book.
For anybody suffering out there in silence, because normally we have our brothers and sisters out there, whether in law enforcement, military, first responders, or even the public suffering, what advice would you give them?
Absolutely. So there's 2 things. One of the biggest mistakes I made in my career was at the very beginning. I told myself that I would never bring work home. I would never talk about the job with my family or loved ones. And by doing that, I created a barrier between my then spouse. I ended up getting a divorce through this nightmare process. I created a divide between us. But when I came home in a bad mood or pissed off, my family was walking on eggshells because they didn't realize it was a horrific car accident or child death that I had to deal with that day. They thought it was them. They thought I was just pissed off or in a bad mood. And so I didn't do the job of communicating, hey, here's what happened today. Not in graphic detail, but enough to let them know that, hey, I've been affected. I just need a little time to decompress, a little space, and then we can re-engage and we can talk about it. So that was the biggest mistake. But, while I was suffering for that 4 years, literally 4 years in darkness, where literally I was losing everything. My health was failing. I lost my father, my hero. My marriage was over. I mean, you name it, it was going, right? And so during that time, I thought I was the only one. I thought there was nobody out there that would understand what I was going through. I thought people would judge me. I thought something was wrong with me. And I didn't realize until I started my recovery process that actually there's countless brothers and sisters out there who do get it, who do understand it. And I'm talking about not just law enforcement and military, but I'm talking about firefighters, paramedics, dispatchers. We all have to deal with these same horrific scenes and issues. And, one thing that we haven't brought up that is detailed in the book is when our own, red family, blue family, green family turn their back on us. And I call that institutional betrayal or administrative betrayal. And so all these things are affecting us, but we don't talk about it. But I want people to know there's endless resources out there. And we have many resources listed in the back of our book, from confidential text lines, hotlines that you can call 24/7, to literally week-long retreats and projects that you can do that don't cost you any money, that literally will change your life, will let you see that you're not alone, that these feelings you're having are actually normal. It's a normal reaction to all the abnormal things that we have to see and deal with. But I want people to know I'm living proof. As dark as it got for me, I'm living a whole new life now, a phenomenal life, a better life than I ever have. And I want people to know that it wasn't easy. It took a lot of work. There was good days and bad days, but I promise you and I assure you, if you take that hardest step and you raise your hand and ask for help, there will be people there to help you.
Michael touched upon it earlier. I think we've touched upon it in the past. We do see things that nobody should really see. And we probably see them at a far greater clip than most people know. Yes, you had your incident. We've had our incidents. But I've been on countless scenes where I've seen people just die with their eyes open, talking that they didn't want to die. And and they're robbery offenders, and they crashed. And you just see things like that. Or you see like a mother running out because her child was gunned down in the street. And you see that time after time after time. And the point we make too is like, you never want to get to a point where it doesn't bother you anymore, because it should bother you, but you need to be able to balance that. Because if you ever get that cold that, oh, it's just one more person shot, who cares? This may not be the job for you anymore.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
For me, reflecting on what you said, Michael, and what you said, David, it's really trying to convey to the public that our public servants are not machines. They're humans, that they experience the same as the next person. And just as you mentioned, I use your words, a higher clip, right? And to please understand that these are human beings that are asked to do extraordinary feats. It's an honorable job to publicly serve, honorably serve. But let's be honest, man, it is without doubt almost unnatural, right? It's unnatural to put the stress that we put on our military and first responders and anyone that's out there serving the public. So we just ask for you to better understand the people who are serving you. We have about a minute left. Michael, any closing thoughts? And two questions. Any closing thoughts? And the other question is for our audience, anyone that wants to get a hold of you, anyone that wants to buy the book, which we encourage everyone to read it, please let them know.
Yeah, so the book is on Amazon. It's on Kindle, paperback, hardcover. The Audible was released a year after the book came out, and it's in our own voice, straight from the heart. Literally, it's like you're there in the experience, and so I highly, highly recommend the Audible version. But yeah, Doc Springer and I poured our heart and soul into this book with one mission, and that's to impact and save as many lives as we can. And I want people, if they do read this, if they do listen to it, I want to hear from you. I want you to reach out to me. I'm on pretty much every social media platform out there, from LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, Parler, Truth, you name it. I want to hear from you. So if you do read it, if you do listen to it, please send me a message, and I promise to you, I will reply to you.
From one brother, two brothers, from an opposite sides of the nation, opposite coasts, we thank you. To the Millers, Michael, Grant, Miller, Miami's Community News, to our audience, we thank you. Michael, thank you for coming on. David, always pleasure to work with you, brother.
Thank you.
And you, the audience, we couldn't do this without you.